Ciao everyone and welcome back to a new episode of Learn Italian with Songs. Today we keep going with the album by Folkstone, Natura Morta. Specifically today we are going to talk about the fourth track titled Lacrime di Marmo, literally marble tears. Now, as usual, keep in mind that metal songs in Italian are usually closer to poetry, so they suppose a comprehension of Italian closer to a level of at least B2, if not C1, or even more sometimes, because they imply the knowledge, they require the knowledge of a portion of vocabulary that is not used every day. Poetic, as I was saying. But also, at least in the case of Folkstone, to understand the song, you also have to have a background, a cultural background, otherwise you don't understand what they are talking about, because the lines are very cryptic. So much so that even I, in this case, had difficulties. In fact, since I started analyzing songs, this was the first time I listened to the song the first time and I was like, what the heck are they talking about? Because, like, you could say, but Silvia, it is titled Tears of Marble Tears. It will be about sorrow, suffering, things like that. No? Yes, but the problem was who is suffering and why is the protagonist of the song suffering? Because that was the conundrum. Now, once again, more niche a song or even a group, a genre is, more alone I am in the analysis and the comprehension of the song, of the lyrics. And this is a classical example because Folkstone are very niche and basically there are no other analysis I can quote. There aren't really interviews, and if there are, they are very generic, often concerning the whole album. So finding information, even statements by the band, is quite hard. In fact, like, I didn't find them. And so I had to give, as usual, but even more than usual, my personal interpretation. And in this case was quite hard because, once again, the lines were quite cryptic. What guided me was, in fact, the title, because usually when we talk about literature and thus also songs, we take into consideration the title, because the title sets the mood, sets the theme, usually, of the song. So I started to think, okay, marble. Yeah, marble is important in Italian culture because, as some of you might know, we have several quarries. Sorry, allergy. So, as I was saying, the issue is that we have quarries and excavation points where we extract marble. Marble is often related to luxury and art. In fact, you can find several churches or monuments generally made in marble in Italy. Some of our most famous masterpieces are in fact built in marble. I'm talking about statues, obviously. For example, the David by Michelangelo is one of the most famous statues in marble, Michelangelo is in fact renowned for having sculpted many sculptures in marble. As I was saying, in fact, it is considered a very expensive, luxurious, refined material to build sculptures or buildings as well. In fact, you can find it in several tastes and flavors in churches, for example. But then why should you cry about it? Well, my interpretation is as follows. It might hint at the objective, by the way, damages the extraction of marble causes for the environment and for the people. Because the extraction of any material, if not done properly, has bad consequences. And in fact, the way I interpreted this song, these lyrics, was a critique of marble extraction in Italy, focusing on its negative environmental and social impact despite its association with luxury and art. And I'm going, of course, to explain you why I think this is the topic, the main topic of the song, by analyzing the lyrics as usual. So, let's start with the first verse. Hai cancellato il mio volto per sempre. Le pareti mie superbe, ora fragili, gridano. You have erased my face forever, and my superb, as in magnificent, walls, now fragile, cry out. Hai frantumato il mio cuore dall'alto. You have shattered my heart from above. E piange il cielo la mia pietra trafitta. And the sky cries my pierced stone. La salsedine scolpisce la ruggine. The saltiness sculpts the rust. Cave dell'oblio. Quarries of oblivion. So, by taking a little bit literally the words used in the lyrics, I started to think, as I was saying, about the issues, the consequence, the negative consequence of marble extraction. We start with hai cancellato il mio volto per sempre. You have erased my face forever, my visage. So, it is true that in this album we talked about identity crisis several times. In fact, the whole song could also be interpreted as a metaphor, one of many we found so far, of an identity, a profound identity crisis, a deep identity crisis, which in fact is one of the main topics of the whole album Natura Morta. But the metaphor used to express this concept, of course, changes once again. So we have a different metaphor pointing to one of the main themes of the album. Of course, this first line is very human because we are talking about a visage. But it could also refer to the environment, specifically to mountains, because of course, usually marbles is extracted in quarries, so open, because you can extract from mines where you go deep down in the belly of the mountain or the hill or whatever you are excavating in. But basically you go under the earth, or you can have an open excavation like a quarry. Usually, marble excavations are done through quarries. To do that, of course, while for mines you just drill into the mountain or the surface of the earth, generally speaking, for quarries you have to split open a hill, a mountain, generally the earth, because of course the quarry is exposed. This causes more damages environmentally, at least starting from a point of view, like in this case, metaphorically speaking, of landscape, because of course a quarry usually is not something pleasant to see, because you rip open the earth. In Italy, often we are talking often about mountains, and of course you destroy the exterior of the mountain, and so you damage the landscape that in this case might be this erased visage they are talking about. And even more, e le pareti mie superbe ora fragili gridano, and my superb as magnificent walls. So we know that Folkstone have a good perception of the landscape and nature. So of course, the walls of a mountain are, or generally, maybe it's not a mountain, but something that has like natural walls, are of course excavated and so destroyed. Even more so, what made me think about the issues related to excavation, generally speaking, in this specific case concerning marble extraction, is the fact that they say ora fragili, now fragile, because one of the negative consequences of excavating without ratio, so like without following specific procedures that aim to also preserve the environment, is that you weaken, of course, the walls of hills, of mountains, of wherever geological part you are excavating in, because of course you have to remove the trees. The trees are very famous to, like they are renowned to be one of the main resources allowing us human beings to prevent landslides. So basically when you have a portion of hills, mountains, whatever that can slide, from sliding down. So I'm talking about when portion of a hill or a mountain detach and fall down on in a road. It can be a town, a village, but basically usually planting trees prevents it because the roots of the trees keep the earth together. Of course, if you have to excavate a quarry, you have first of all to remove the trees, which of course is a way to weaken the ground. And then we have hai frantumato il mio cuore dall'alto. You have shattered my heart from above. What is this shattered heart? Of course, at least in my opinion, we are talking about the marble, which is the core that we are going to excavate to extract. And of course, how do you do it? By drilling, by excavating, and of course by shattering blocks, so you can extract the block and transport it. And specifically dall'alto, from above, because we are talking about quarrying from above, so forming the quarries for the extraction. Generally, it would work also with mines, because what you do is you start from a point and you start going down, because you have to reach the core where the minerals you want to extract can be found. And then, e piange il cielo la mia pietra trafitta, and the sky cries my pierced stone. Once again, we are talking about the marble that is being extracted. That's why pierced, one of the other ways to take the stone. But also a verb, usually employed when we are talking about hearts. Usually un cuore trafitto is a pierced heart. I don't think I have to explain the symbology behind this image, but here we don't have the heart, we have the stone. Why? Because, as I said, the marble represents the core of the ground, the mountain, the piece of land that is being extracted. Now, why am I talking about quarries? Because as I said, usually marble is extracted in quarries and not mines. Quarries, once again, are open, are exposed to the outside. It's not mined in the belly of the ground. It's exposed to the earth, the sun, and of course, the sky. Here we have an evocative image because we have the sky crying, raining, on the open quarry, so on the place where the core of the ground, the marble, is exposed. And this might also be a reference to the fact that a quarry can be seen like an open wound as well, where the on which the sky is crying on. Also, like, fun fact, when you extract marble, you produce a powder, okay? A specific type of dust that can cause several issues, environmentally speaking, when it becomes a sort of mud because it rains on it. So basically, what happens is that you excavate, you extract the marble, you generate this dust, this powder. When it rains, this dust, this powder, it becomes a very specific type of mud that can cause damages to the earth and the environment. La salsedine scolpisce la ruggine. The saltiness sculpts the rust. Now, here we have a verb, scolpire. La salsedine scolpisce. The saltiness sculpts, which is normally used to refer to sculpting marble. Of course, like in any other language, in Italian we have specific verbs related to the working on marble. So we can use the verb scolpire, we can use the verb cesellare, and usually these are verbs related to this very specific activity. So normally the saltiness does not sculpt the rust, because normally it is an artist sculpting a sculpture, sculpting the marble. But here we have a sort of inversion. So, why saltiness? First of all, I was once again a bit confused because I was like, we don't have that many quarries, however, near the sea, because we have many quarries in Tuscany. Tuscany, of course, has a whole portion of the region that is on the sea. But the most famous production points concerning marbles are Massa and Carrara, two cities in Tuscany. But they are not on the sea. Of course, the wind and the saltiness can reach Massa e Carrara as well, just it can reach Pisa, okay? But they are not exactly on the sea. So I started to do some research. And apparently there is a quarry that you can visit, by the way, and it's still working, like is not closed, because we have several mines and quarries in Italy that exhausted the extraction potential, or simply the extraction wasn't useful anymore, so they closed. And usually in order to allow a bit of maintenance, they are converted into museums. As far as I understood, this specific quarry I'm talking about, which is called Cave di Versilia quarries in Tuscany, as I was saying, Toscana, are exactly on the sea. They are still working. You can visit them. You can even book visits to these quarries. And I don't know, maybe the Folkstone once went to visit this quarry. I don't know. But it's basically the only quarry I found that is exactly on the sea. And here we are talking about saltiness that sculpts, so usually saltiness corrodes, does not sculpt, so here it is used with irony, the rust. Now, what could the rust represent? It could represent industrial decay, because sadly, it happens that we have mines and quarries that are not useful anymore, and they just get abandoned. Of course, it is not legal, but we know that in Italy we have several issues with illegal works. Or sometimes the enterprise taking care of it bankrupts, so of course nobody cares anymore because there are bureaucratic processes. There is a bureaucratic process where you have to change who is going to take care of the quarry. Sometimes they get just abandoned. Sometimes it is because of bureaucratic malfunctions and the quarry is just left there. And so we have the image of implants or machineries or other portion of a quarry that can rust. And we have this image of this abandoned quarry that is full of rusty components that are being corroded by the saltiness. And in fact, Folkstone called them cave dell'oblio. Cave literally would be caves. Not literally, but like the false friend would in English would be caves, but in this case cava, okay, is false friend with cave, and in fact the real translation is quarries. So cave dell'oblio, quarries of oblivion, as in forgotten quarries. Quarries nobody is taking care of anymore. And as I was saying, it is an issue because it has a negative impact on the environment. It has a negative impact on the cities because, of course, it is dangerous to have an open quarry that is just left there. So maybe people are not even incentivized to go and to go live in a city that is near a forgotten quarry. Of course, once you open a quarry, you have to take care of it, just like with mines. So if you just leave it there, it can cause issues like landslide, flooding, disruption of hydric resources underground. So it can cause many problems. That's why I'm saying chances are the whole meaning of this song is a metaphor of losing your identity, because as we said is one of the main themes of the album, but through the metaphor of a problem that we really have, which is the extraction of marble done without reason, without reasonment, without ratio, without thinking carefully of the aftermath. So like basically reckless excavation, reckless extraction. Then we have a brief chorus. Il mare avvolge, the sea envelops, le lacrime di marmo, the marble tears. Di questa mia vita, of this life of mine, ne voglio ancora 3. I want 3 more. Now, let's start with the last line because I have to make a comment because I'm not sure what what Folkstone are saying, like in Italian, what they are pronouncing in this line. Because if we take the line as you would understand it, like at first glance, at first listen, you would understand ne voglio ancora 3. I want 3 more. But it doesn't make sense saying I want 3 more lives like this, because it is either meant ironically, or they are actually saying something else. So my point is, what if they are not saying ne voglio ancora 3, but ne voglion ancora 3, where voglion would be the truncated form of vogliono, they want. Because if we interpret it in this way, it would be of this life of mine, they want 3 more. In this case, it would match the idea of the marble tears, or even better, the tears of marble, where the marble here is personified as a creature that is suffering, as we saw in the first verse, which is being also enveloped, giving the idea of being hugged and comforted by the sea. And that's why I was mentioning the queries next to the sea of Versilia. Now, if we mean it as they want 3 more, who is they? We, humankind. And in this case, we would have a rightful criticism to overconsumption, because clearly, why would you recklessly extract marble? Because, as I was saying, it is a luxury material. It is often used in, for example, kitchen. Having the counter with the surface in marble is considered luxury. Fun fact, it is actually shit. Like, my mother always complained about picking a counter with the top in marble. My mother is a chemical engineer, because she said, out of all the things you can pick to cover your counters, why would you pick the marble, where if you drop a bit of vinegar or a bit like 2 drops of lemon or anything like slightly acid is going to get through in, which is true. Marble, it is beautiful, but it is not really meant to be used. It's more delicate than what you might think. And in fact, it is also, mainly in the past, was associated to luxury, because you also have to maintain it. It is a cost to maintain marble statues, for example. And in fact, for example, the Davide by Michelangelo, the David by Michelangelo, was supposed to be in one of the main squares of Florence. Fun fact, you can still find a statue there, but it is a replica. Why? because by leaving the real statue there, it would be gone in some very few years. So actually, if you want to see the original one, you have to go in a gallery. It's not in the Uffizi, I don't remember right now how is it called, the gallery where you can find the David of Michelangelo. But basically, just to put into perspective, it is kept safely away from the pigeons and the people, and gets it needs a lot of maintenance. So once again, it's not something that you can really use. And if you use it, for example, because you want to decorate your garden, or because you want to have the top of your counter in marble, it's going to get ruined quite fast, and thus you'll have to change it. Thus consuming. This demand of marble, which is not that common, of course, implies that you have to extract more and more and more. And this might lead to reckless extraction, so without taking into consideration the geological risks, the environmental implications of that, and all the negative effects that anything done recklessly can lead to. So that's why it would make more sense for Folkstone to say ne voglion ancora tre. But of course, when singing, sometimes we cut things as well. And what would it be? The life they are talking about, the core of the query, so the extraction of these of the marble. And then we have the second verse, which is very brief. E mentre l'aria si fa greve, respiro. And as the air grows heavy, I breathe. Stan soffocando le mie vene indifese. They are suffocating my defenseless veins. Le mie cime selvagge ora tremano e chiedono pietà. My wild peaks now tremble and ask for mercy. Now, what is this air growing heavy? Probably it is a reference to the dust I was mentioning before, which is a result of the marble extraction. And in fact, we have another line that can be interpreted in two ways, because stan soffocando le mie vene indifese. Now, grammatically speaking, this line can be interpreted in two ways. Loro stanno soffocando le mie vene indifese, so where the veins is the object of the sentence. So the humans, we, the extractors, are suffocating my veins, or my veins are suffocating. Generally speaking, the meaning doesn't change much, because the whole point here is actually the veins. You have to know that normally, in Italian, just like in English, the veins are these. So, the conducts of our body transporting blood. Now, in Italian, however, una vena is the vein of the human body, or anybody having veins. But if in the context of minerals, la vena indicates the, or venatura indicates the spot in the ground where you have the site of excavation. So basically the point where you want to excavate to extract the material you want. So the idea here is that we have a mountain, because in the line after they talk about wild peaks, so something tall having a peak which usually is a mountain. So we have a mountain that is being split open because the extractors are looking for the veins of marble. So where you go and extract the marble. But once again, why do we have then these wild pigs trembling and asking for mercy? Once again, it could be a reference to the landslide. Why the ground should tremble and ask for mercy? Because it is about to collapse. Usually landslides are related to little earthquakes because we have the phenomenon where a portion of the mountain detaches itself, crumbling on a lower portion, usually in the valley and at the feet of the mountain. And of course, this whole process of detaching and sliding, landsliding, also brings with it little earthquakes. And that's why I was thinking even harder about the risk of the quarry excavation and reckless extraction of marble. But once again, it doesn't work only with marble. Whatever reckless extraction, quarries or mine can cause landslides, crumbling, whatever disaster you can think about when something crumbles. And then we have a variation of the chorus that is repeated 2 times. So we have the band singing this chorus 1 time. And then we have an instrumental bridge, and then once again the repetition of the chorus used as an outro. Once again we have il mare avvolge, the sea envelops, le lacrime di marmo, the marble tears, the tears of marble. But here changes, e tu, chi sei? And you, who are you? Da che parte stai? Whose side are you on? Il mare avvolge, the sea envelops, le lacrime di marmo, the marble tears. Di questa mia vita, of this life of mine, ne voglio or ne voglion ancora 3. I want or they want 3 more. Same reasoning we talked about before. So where is the change? The change is that the previous chorus is doubled in sections, but in the first section we have the second part which changes, because instead of di questa mia vita ne voglio or ne voglion ancora 3, we have e tu, chi sei, da che parte stai, and you, who are you, whose side are you on? And this was another hint that pushed me towards the idea of thinking of exploitation of natural resources, in this case marble, but as I was saying, it can be applied to several matters. And the whole point is, are you informed about the damage marble extraction is causing in our land? Because, guys, I'll be honest, I don't know how the marble extraction is managed in other countries, so far from me to judge about it. But for example, in Italy, I know that there are some quarries properly managed, but there are also other quarries that are quite reckless considering the extraction, and thus they cause issues. In fact, we already have several zones that are called a rischio idrogeologico, which are those zones where we have floods and issues relating to the hydric courses, and of course the quarries messing with the bodies of water are not really helping also with this problem that we are having in Italy. Then once again, we have an issue with pollution, we have an issue with landslides, we have an issue with the falde acquifere, so the basin that you find underground where the water is naturally filtered so that can go back to the cycle of water. For those of you who don't know what the cycle of water is the cycle the water goes through from the underground basin to outside, so rivers, lakes, where we get the water. Then after we consume the water evaporates, because usually the waters technically should be cleaned after being used. For example, when you shower or when you wash the dishes, you have centrals, water centrals that are supposed to clean the water and put it back, usually in the sea or in bodies of water. This way, the water can go generally to the sea, evaporates, then it gets a first cleanup technically by evaporating, creating the clouds, and then becoming rain, and then after becoming rain, a little bit is going once again to the bodies of water, or for example in the snow, in the mountains and whatnot, but generally the majority goes into the earth. Once again, it gets naturally filtered through the several layers of the earth, and then ends up in the basins clean as it should be. Now, this whole cycle of water would be perfect if we weren't polluting the water in the meantime, because of course in the whole cycle we are putting some effort polluting the water in all several steps. So what happens is that reckless extraction of marble also contributes to the pollution of this basin, but generally the waters. And as I was saying, this is one thing. Another negative effect can be the landsliding, the disruption of the landscape, and so on, and so on, and so on. And this whole environmental issues, it is also used on a second level as a metaphor of losing what we are, and also a criticism to consumistic behaviors which are destroying our planet and thus ourselves, because these are two of the main themes of the album we found several times. So, this was the analysis of Lacrime di Marmo. I can't speak. So, in summary, this song is very niche. This is the interpretation I gave. I did my research. I gave you my point of view. I gave you my reasons. Once again, I don't live rent-free in the head of the artist, so once again, I might be wrong. Let's say that I tried to gather all the hints, put them together, and give it a meaning. In my opinion, the interpretation I gave works in the economy of the whole album, because we keep mentioning some of the main themes of the album, and it also makes sense with the vision of Folkstone, because We noticed in other songs, for example, so far Appennino, that Folkstone care about our like nature. And in fact, the word nature, natura, is even in the title of the album, Natura Morta, which would make sense, would make it reasonable to expect criticism against reckless practices that destroy the environment, because let's remember that Natura Morta means in Italian still life, but it literally translates as dead nature. So given the title of the album and given the meaning of other song we analyzed, it makes sense to expect a criticism against reckless practices, which as one of the negative effects have disrupting the environment, have the damage, like implied damaging the environment. That said, I hope you enjoyed this analysis. Let me know in the comments what you think, if you have further interpretation, different interpretation, if you agree with my point of view or not. That said, grazie everyone for watching and arrivederci.